Welcome to Lesson 1-3 for regular geometry. This recording is designed for either a substitute or a student to go through at their own pace. When I pause, please pause the presentation so that you can work the problem or do the examples or take the notes and then start back up again. I have not built in the exact time period that I think that it takes you to accomplish each of the things along the way. So interact with this presentation so that you understand the lesson as presented. This is lesson 1-3. You should have some homework, and so I want you first to bring up your homework assignment and check the answers for your homework assignment. Again, you have to pause it so that you can check it all and then start up again. I will scroll and show you some more of the answers. Here are some more. And the last bunch. So if you have some questions on those assignment problems, please mark them and plan to talk to me about them when I return the next day of school. Here are bell ringer problems for you to do. So pause so that you can work the problem, then when I click, the next screen will show you the solution. If you don't practice, you won't get good. And the solution. You needed to draw a picture to see how you could set up your equation on that one. Here's bell ringer number 2. And the solution. Bell ringer number 3. The solution. Bell ringer number 4. And the solution. Bell ringer number 5. And the solution. Bell ringer number 6. Be sure you didn't just answer what x equals. Find the length of segment AB. And the answer is? Okay, so now you've checked your homework and you've looked at the bell ringer. Let's get into the actual lesson today. Yesterday we found the distance between 2 points on a line segment. Now we're going to look closer at what the midpoint of a segment is. We will need to do some work with tools today, so you'll get to do some drawings. A couple terms for new vocabulary. Again, you need to pause the presentation so that you can write down the notes and then start it back up so that you can have some explanation. So here's some notes for you on midpoint and segment bisector. So if you finished your notes, I want you to make sure that you notice on the midpoint diagram, we've got M all marked as the midpoint. The tick marks that are on each side of that segment need to be there to indicate that those two segments are the same. They're congruent, they have equal lengths. If the tick marks are not there or measurements aren't there, it is not a midpoint just because you put it somewhere between where you think maybe the middle is. Have to communicate what you're intending. Same thing on segment bisector. This line L is the segment bisector. Segment AB is what's getting bisected by M. Again, the tick marks indicating that's really a midpoint. So a midpoint is just a point. A segment bisector is something bigger. but it still goes through the same location. Here's some notes again. You need to pay attention to directions on our course because sometimes a construction would be created which uses special constructing or drawing tools. A drawing, if the directions say to draw something, you can use measuring tools like a ruler and a protractor to make it a fairly good drawing. A sketch is really just freehand with your pencil. Do the best you can to make things look the way they're supposed to. So it will help you know how much detail you should be going into on a certain problem or exercise by paying attention to what word the directions are saying. So pause to finish your notes. So let's do creating a segment bisector and a midpoint by some different methods. Okay, the first method is simply sketch the midpoint of the segment. And then we're going to sketch a segment bisector. Okay, sketching means just using freehand drawing. So pause to make your sketch. Then what you should have done is just with your pencil, drawn a segment, and then here's the midpoint, tick marks. I'll put 2 this time so it's a little bit different. There's a midpoint of a segment. A segment bisector is any line or ray or segment that goes through that midpoint location. So there's a sketch of a midpoint and then a segment bisector. When you do a drawing, you can use a ruler in order to draw a better straight segment and then to measure to see where the midpoint is. So I'm going to draw a segment that is, I'm going to use the tools here. I'm going to draw a segment that is, let's say, 4 inches long. Okay, based upon where I have the ruler here. Let me move the ruler just a little bit. Okay, there's 4 inches. So now that I've moved it, I can locate where the midpoint is by measuring. So that point is the actual midpoint of the segment. I know because this is 2 inches, this is 2 inches. Since I measured, I can give the exact measurement. And let's see if I can move the ruler to get it to draw in the right spot. I need to tip it a little bit. All right, I'm not getting it to tip. All right, so let me just use the drawing tool and draw a line between there. I want arrows on each end. So let's say here, I'll go right through there, and there's a line that is the segment bisector. So I used tools to make things more straight and more accurate. I actually measured to create that segment bisector and midpoint. Now if you have a construction is using some specific tools. You'll see on the board there we have a compass. We have I'm going to call it a straight edge. Notice there aren't any markings on it. Now I didn't supply you with a straight edge separate from a ruler. We're going to use the ruler as a straight edge, but we are ignoring all markings on it. You cannot measure when you do constructions. So really anything that has a straight edge can be used as a straight edge tool. So whether it's just a folded sheet of paper, the edge of a notebook card, a note card, a lot of things can be your straight edge. And then a pencil to draw with. So these are the tools you need. Mainly compass and straight edge would be the unique tools. So we're going to use these in order to construct the midpoint. So look in your supply bag. You should have these tools. Let's construct the midpoint of a segment, and then we're going to construct the segment bisector. Okay, I've got my compass, and I drew a segment using my straight edge, just a random length, maybe about 3 inches long. Again, pause so that you can do these things. Okay, now to use the compass, in order to do this, I hope I can manipulate this tool for you well enough. You're going to put the point of your compass on one end of the segment. Then you will open the compass a distance that you estimate is more than half of the length of that segment. In other words, open it up more than where you think the midpoint's going to be. If you want to go all the way to the end of the segment, that's fine, but you need to go past where the midpoint's going to be. Okay, and I want to see what I'm going to be drawing with here. Okay, I think I'm good. All right, so now that I've got it positioned, I'm just going to swing an arc up above and below. Make sure it goes around quite a ways in order to finish out what we're going to do. Now pick up that compass. Don't change the setting on it. So just in case I goof up, I'm looking at what the numbers are, 159 and 148. Okay, I'm going to position the compass point now at the end of that, the segment, the other end of the segment. And I'm going to try and draw. I'm drawing the arc. You didn't have to start way out where mine was, but it's hard to flip this around without changing the angle. Okay, now I'm going to move the compass so you can see what I did there. I've got the same arc from each end of the segment. They cross at 2 points. I need this crossing point and this crossing point, because now my next step is with your straight edge. Line up those 2 points, and I've got a drawing tool, so I can just use the drawing tool here. But line up your straight edge and draw so that it goes exactly through those 2 points. So by doing that, now we have made this point the midpoint. We've created that segment and that segment the same length because the compass didn't change. And this line that you drew is a segment bisector. If you want to draw another one slanted differently, that's still another segment bisector. But the one that I created is also already a segment bisector. So we constructed the midpoint, and we came up with the segment bisector. Now you have to have these 2 intersection points. You have to have point 1 and point 2 that I've numbered up there, because in order to draw that connecting line with your straight edge, you have to have 2 points to draw a line. So don't try and get by with just one and then guess. That's not accurate for a construction. Okay, it would be good to pause, do the same thing a second time without me going step by step, and see if you can construct the midpoint of a new segment. Maybe tip it a bit, or make it longer or shorter so that it looks a little bit different. Okay. So now another construction is to construct a segment that's congruent to the given segment. So I've got a segment AB, and I'm going to make a copy of it where A prime is at. Again, you'll use your compass and straight edge. Well, it looks like I need a compass on this screen. Okay, the compass, I'm going to position it so that the end of it is on one of the endpoints, and then open it up so that it goes to the very other endpoint. I'm going to make a mark to make sure I'm really hitting that spot in the right place. Okay, so there's B. So when I pick up the compass, it has the length of AB established. Don't change it. So pick that compass up, move it to A prime, put the point of the compass there, swing the arc, and we'll move the compass out of the way. So that point that you just created here, that's where B prime is, and the length of AB and the length of A prime, B prime are the very same. Congruent segments have the same length, so all we did was set our compass and transferred that length to where we want the copy to be. So you should know 2 constructions today. You are constructing, actually 3, constructing a midpoint, a segment bisector, and then actually just a congruent segment. Those are some of the constructions that we use at various times through our course. Okay, let's go back to some more ideas related to midpoints. Okay, this problem is talking about a drag racing strip. Read through the problem. Okay, so we've got a drag strip a 1/4 mile long. I think they call it a 1/4 mile. So from this point to this point is 1/4 mile. It's asking where the midpoint is, but it's not asking you in terms of miles, it's in terms of feet. So you've got to use some converting. 1/4 of a mile. Convert that into feet, and then we can continue the problem. All right, what was the fact that you needed to recall? 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So how many feet was that whole mile? I mean the 1/4 mile. That should have been 5280 divided by 4. How about 1,320 feet? So all I did was took 1/4 times 5,280 or divide it correctly. So now instead of miles, we're recognizing this whole distance is 1,320 feet. Now figure out how many feet from the finish line the midpoint is. And the answer to the problem, 660 feet. Here's another story. Read through what it says, and then I'll pick up with you and lead you to the answer. So marking some information on the diagram, it says the picture is 15 inches from the wall. So here's the wall. A is at 15 inches. And then the nail, or let's see, the edge, the right edge is 37.5 inches. So we need to figure out what is, halfway in between there. So there's really 2 methods you could do here. So you see if you can figure out a method and come up with an answer. I'm going to pause. Okay, as far as solutions, this one is using what's called the midpoint formula. It's taking the 15 and the 37.5 and averaging those together, add them and divide by 2, and that gives you the number that's exactly in between, which would be 26.25, and in terms of inches, 26.25 inches from the left. That would be your answer. Now there is a different way that you could do that. Oh, I guess let me back up. Oh, it's on the screen. Another method is to find the length of half of segment AB and then add it to the smaller coordinate. So let me back up. So you could figure out how far A and B were apart. Go back to the numbers here. So those are 37.5 minus 15, 22.5 inches apart. So if you want the midpoint, divide that by 2. So how far to the midpoint is 11.25 inches. So now you have to either take 15 and add on the 11.25 inches, or you have to take 37.5 and subtract the 11.25 inches. And on both of these, you should be getting 26.25. Subtract your borrow correctly. So the location, again, was 26.25 or 26.25 inches from the left. 2 different ways to solve that. So this formula, this screen has notes on it. The midpoint formula is a way that you can get the location of the midpoint using the coordinates of the 2 ends. So you're averaging those together. So pause so you can take your notes. Well, let's have you find the coordinate of the midpoint of segment QR. The answer would be exactly here, which would be -6 plus -3 divided by 2. -9 divided by 2, -4.5. That would be the location on the number line. Again, if you want to do how far they are apart, divide it by 2 and then add or subtract to get the location. You can do that method. Here's another question. And the answer on that one, I guess I have to write it up here. -5 plus 3 divided by 2. Should have been -1. -1 would be 4 units this way and 4 units this way. So that's the midpoint. If you are on an XY axis, you've got two numbers to always work with. You have an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. So to find the complete XY combination, you have to average the X's of the endpoints and the Y's of the endpoints. So again, pause so that you get your notes, and then we'll practice a bit. All right, so practice problems. Find the coordinates of M, which is going to be the midpoint of GH. There's G and there's H. Write down that formula. You don't want to have to graph everything. So write the formula. Let's use G as x1, y1, the x and the y from the first point, and H is the x and the y from the second point. All right, plug into that midpoint formula and let's see what your coordinates are. What location is the midpoint? All right, and the answer should come out to be -3, 3. So if we graph those 2 points, -8, or excuse me, 8, -6 would be around in this area. And H, -14, +12, so that's going to be up quite a ways. Let's see. The point that's in between there, oh, whoops, I graphed wrong. I'm sorry. We all make mistakes. 8, -6 would be about here. -14, +12 would be off this direction. So, again, it would be better if I did this with exact graph paper. So -3, +3, somewhere in that vicinity would be the point that we're locating as the midpoint. What I was trying to get you to do there is to think logically. Did it make sense what I just came up with? That's the segment that would be the same distance from each end. Try this one. I've given you some choices. Pause, figure it out, and then we'll check your answer. The answer is B. Another example, you have to work this one out. It's not a multiple choice. And the answer comes out in mixed numbers, -2.5, 1.5. If you had -2.5 and +1.5, that's the same thing. All right, so what do you need to practice more? Need one with more negatives? Let's pick something. -5, -10, and -7, -3. Find the midpoint. The solution, the midpoint should be your average. averaging the x's, averaging the y's. So I'm getting -6, -6.5, or 0.5. That would be the point that's exactly halfway between there. And you can continue with more examples as needed. Now this problem's a little bit different because if you read it carefully, it says N is the midpoint of segment RS. So I'm giving you one endpoint, then the midpoint, and you have to find the other endpoint. For this first one, it might be worth graphing to see where the answer is going to be at all. So on your graph, like on your marker board or some graph paper, it would be good to do this more accurately than my just sketching it. So let's see. N is 8, -3, which if I didn't make a mistake would be about there. S is -1 and then +5, so possibly about there. Okay, now let's read it again. N is the midpoint of RS. So if S is there and N's the midpoint, R is going to have to be out here somewhere. Has to be the same distance, though. So looking at the answers, I don't think that it could be B or A. It's probably either C or D. Looking where it's at, I'm thinking D seems the most logical. So can we calculate and come up with those two numbers? We should be able to. Let's verify that that was the right answer. Okay, so how do we get there? Here's what you could do. S is -1, N was 8, -3, and we don't know what R is. Let's just call those X, Y. Now to do a midpoint, that formula said average the endpoints to get the midpoint. So if I take the X plus -1 and divide by 2, that has to equal the 8 that is the X in the midpoint point. And then the same with the Y. So let me write the Y part. The Y part would be Y plus 5 divided by 2 equals -3. So we've got two separate equations that we can solve in order to come up with the coordinates. To solve it, multiply by 2 on each side. That gets rid of that fraction. And then subtract 1. So I'm getting X to be 17. Excuse me. What did I do? Oh, I forgot my negative. 17. Okay, and then for the Y part, multiply by 2 on each side. Y plus 5 equals -6, minus 5 from each side, and the Y is -11. So notice I got the point 17, -11 when I worked it out. So think about that example again. The two endpoints average to make the midpoint. All right, so that was leading you to that. Okay, so here's one that is not multiple choice, so you can't just eliminate and figure out which one seems most logical. So pause so that you can work this one out. E is the midpoint. I gave you one endpoint, F, and you're supposed to find D. Work it out and we'll check your answer. All right, your answer. That's kind of leading you with some highlighting. The answer should be -7, 11. Again, flip back to the solution or how to work it in order to understand if you didn't do it right. Realize the multiplying by 2 on each side eliminates the fraction denominator. And that's the step that you start on solving both of them. Now this one's still related to a midpoint, but it's a different kind of problem. Draw yourself a diagram to start with. B is the midpoint of AC. Don't forget to put the tick marks on the diagram so that you know, okay, that those two segments are supposed to be the same. Fill in the information and give some thought to how you would solve it. Then start back up so that I can give you the solution. Make sure that you have answered what the value of x is, and then you substitute it in to find the length of AB, BC, and AC. There's a lot of things you need to find on this one. Okay, here are the solutions that you should have gotten. The equation you used probably was 4x minus 2 plus 3x plus 3 equals not equals, how about equal each other? I couldn't find the total, so I knew I was doing something wrong. There you go. So when you solved, x was 5. So it's not like yesterday. That's what I was trying to do because I'm recording this on the day that we just did that other lesson. But today we're looking at midpoint. Okay, those two segments have to be equal to each other on the segment midpoint. Okay. What's the measure of PR if Q is the midpoint of PR? So take a look at the information, set an equation, and try and solve. Okay, the solution on that one. X is 1/2. Now if you didn't get that, let's go back and see. Are the two lengths that you were given the two that are equal? And that should be no. PQ and QR are the ones that are equal. So you cannot put 14x plus 2 equals 6 minus 3x. That's not going to work. You could do it the way that the solution is showing, or maybe you're thinking, okay, if that one's 6x minus 3, this one's also 6x minus 3. So you could do 6x minus 3 plus another 6x minus 3, 6 minus 3x. I wrote it right but said it wrong. And that has to equal 14x plus 2. That would be another way to set the problem up and solve it, combine like terms and finish solving. The way the solution is that I'm showing you is they took half of the whole thing and set that equal to just the QR. So again, that's another way to solve it. You'll get the same solution both ways if you work it correctly. Then when you substituted in, PR was 9 units. Try this one. It's something similar to what you just did. Pause and then I'll give you the answer. I hope that you didn't just try and plug numbers, but you really worked through and tried the equation way. Now you're trying to find the length of AC. So this answer is not just what X is. I think X or A was 3. But the question's asking what's the measure of segment AC. And AC is the whole big one. So 3 times 3 plus 1. All right, and still related to our number line and distances, find X on segment AF so that it's 1/6 of the distance from A to F. 1/6 of the distance. So let's figure out how far it is from A to F, here to here. And for a method, you might recall that you can subtract those coordinates and do the absolute value. So AF is 12. So now I'm interested in what's 1/6 of that distance. So 1/6 of 12 is 2. So 2 units from A to AF. So from A, 1, 2, right there is the location. So X is going to be at -5. Find X so that it's 1/6 the distance. Okay, so if you have some time here now, let's review what we did yesterday, practice a little bit more distance formula and Pythagorean theorem. Find the distance between these 2 points, pause it, work the problem, I'll give you the answer. The answer is square root of 53, does not simplify. And if you wanted a decimal, 7.28 gives you an idea of what it is. Now I'm showing that you could check that or work it using Pythagorean theorem. Remember how we made that right triangle? So 2 units and 7 units, that worked through. To get D, you square root each side. So that distance is also the square root of 53, checked or worked using Pythagorean theorem on the right triangle. Find the distance between these 2 points. This one is pictured on a graph. Choose your method. Do you want distance formula or Pythagorean theorem? Figure it out. And the solution is C. All right, so some thoughts for an exit ticket to make sure that you understood certain important parts on the lesson. So think through these 3 questions. So the type of answers you should be getting, the symbol for congruent was the equal sign with that tilde on top. The difference between a midpoint and a segment bisector is that a midpoint is just a point and a segment bisector is a line, a ray, or a segment. It didn't ask how they're similar, but they are similar because they both cut a segment in half. Okay, the tools for a construction should be compass and straight edge, probably a pencil. A drawing could be a ruler, a protractor, and a pencil. And then a sketch is just a pencil. So you get more specific or detailed, better drawings depending upon if you're constructing, drawing, or sketching. The construction is actually the most precise. Okay, so you're ready for the assignment, and the assignment will be given by the substitute, or I will email you that if you are using this as a catch-up lesson. I will see you the next day we have school. Bye.